My name is Enzo and I am a dog. Before I reincarnate into a human, I would like to share my story with you. This is my draw my life. My owner Danny picked me out of a pile of puppies, a tangled rolling mass of paws and ears and tails behind a barn in a smelly field near a town in eastern Washington called Spangle. I never knew my father, but I remember my mother. She did not seem like us much. She was relieved when she saw one of us go. I always thought that my father was a terrier because they are problem solvers like us. Denny moved me far from Spangle to settle to a Seattle neighborhood called Leschi. We would watch videos together, and Denny talked to me like I was human and taught me the art of racing in the rain. I didn't like the apartment much because I was a pup. I grew up quickly, and during that first year, Denny and I forged a deep bondness for each other, as well as feelings of trust, which is why I was so surprised when Denny fell in love with Eve so quickly. Eve was sweet-smelling, and I didn't like her at first. She taunted me with her opposable thumbs. I resented how she changed our lives. She was well-groomed, and Denny liked her better than me because she was human. Her and Denny got married in a small wedding ceremony. While I was unhappy with her intrusion, there was something about her that prevented me from mustering any real anger. I believe that thing was her swollen belly. I admired females, the life makers. It was an early birth, and Denny was away at the 24 hours of Dayton race. Eve gave birth to Zoe and allowed me to stay in my room. From then on, I swore to protect Zoe. Denny was disappointed that he couldn't be there during the day. Zoe was at daycare, and Eve and Denny were at work. I started watching TV, and Denny accidentally left the TV on at day. Zoe was at daycare, and Eve and Denny were at work. I started watching TV when Denny accidentally left the TV on one day. Seeing that I was entertained by it, he left it on for me every day afterwards. One of the things I saw was a documentary on Mongolia. In Mongolia, when a dog dies, he is buried high in the hills so people cannot walk on his grave. The dog's master whispers into the dog's ears his wishes that the dog will return as the man in his next life. I believe this is true, and this was what kept me going when I felt frustrated that I couldn't talk. On Zoe's second birthday, they had a party with cake, and afterward, Denny showed a picture to Zoe and Eve. Zoe didn't seem to have interest, but Eve started crying because it was a picture of a house. Everyone was excited about the house, but I was happy because the yard was big enough for me to run around. When Denny was away and Eve fed me, leaning down to give me a bowl of food, and my nose was near her head, I had detected a bad odor like rotting wood, mushrooms, decay. I knew that there was something terribly wrong with her, but I hadn't a facile tongue to say something, so there was nothing I could do to help her. One day when Eve, Denny, and I were watching a race, it reminded me of a quote that Denny used to say, "That which we manifested is before us. We are the creators of our own destiny, be it through intention or ignorance. Our success and our failures have been brought on by none other than ourselves." Eve didn't really get racing, so she went into the kitchen. I noticed that Eve and I grew farther apart, so I made an effort to change that. I went to the kitchen and lay down. She noticed a change in my behavior and returned it by petting me. Denny wanted to enter the Watkins Glen race, but it cost a lot of money. He told everyone that he got the money from his parents as a gift. On race day, Eve got a bad headache. She confided me, "I feel like someone is crushing my skull." And she kept repeating it as she packed a bag, took Zoe, and left the house. Frustrated that I can't open the door, I decided that I would ration the toilet water. I picked up food from the floor left by Zoe and did my business on the mat by the back door. On the second day, I walked into Zoe's room and saw a stuffed zebra molesting Zoe's other toys. Afterwards, it ripped itself up. Denny comes home and finds me, realizing that I was alone. He feeds me and praises me for doing my business on the mat. When Eve comes back home with Zoe after Denny calls her, they fight over how Eve abandoned me for a few days without food or water. Zoe then discovers her stuffed animals that were ripped into pieces by the zebra, and Denny accused me of doing it. He hits me in anger and was about to hit me again, but was stopped by Eve, who stood in front of me. Denny walks out the room, and I go over to Zoe. I felt disappointed because Zoe was disappointed in me. Later, I find Denny on the porch with alcohol. He sees me and apologizes for hitting me, and tells me that he got first place in the race. I was worried that he would get more offers, which comes true. Before he leaves me, he tells me that he thinks Eve has a virus, which makes me frustrated because I can't tell him he's wrong. Eve's condition was unpredictable. She had headaches, nausea, dizziness, and mood swings. All of these were signs that something bigger was happening inside Eve's head. Denny was frustrated because he didn't know what was going on. It's frustrating for me to be unable to speak, to feel that I have so much to say, so many ways I can help, but I'm locked in a soundproof box, a game show installation booth from which I can see and hear what's going on, but they never turn on my microphone, and they never let me out. I'm not only one. Lots of dogs experience this and are frustrated. That's why you hear few news of dogs biting their owner's face off. Denny started taking care of Eve more often. I was convinced that the zebra caused all of this. In the winter, Eve didn't eat. She was drawn and pale. Denny tried to get Eve a doctor, but she refused. Her eyes have been sucked deep into her sockets and were sucked into the puffy skin. In the midst of this all, I tricked the crows into eating my poop. Denny gets another offer and tells Eve and Zoe, but not me. Denny got last place. The day Denny comes back, Eve gets impatient with Zoe for not eating her nuggets. Denny wants to make Zoe another dinner, but Eve breaks down, saying he was always spoiling her. In reality, the nuggets were really spoiled. Eve cuts herself trying to make another dinner for Zoe, and Denny takes care of Eve while I take care of Zoe. I still think the zebra caused all of this. The first time I went over Eve's parents' house, Eve's parents started insulting Denny, and Eve defends him. After visiting, Denny goes to another race, and Eve was feeling better. Denny comes in last place again. In August, the whole family went to Denny Creek. I ran out smelling nature. Eve, Denny, and Zoe were playing in the slippery slabs in the river after hiking. In their swimsuits, Eve pushed Zoe down the slabs to Denny, and they did this over and over. One time, Zoe upset Eve's balance. Eve released Zoe to safety, but she falls and hits her head on a rock and bled. Denny takes her to the hospital. After a while, Denny comes out of the hospital and lets me out of the car. Since I can go into the hospital, we sit together and watch the parking lot. Mike comes and talks to Denny while I listen. Denny tells Mike that Eve has a tumor, and Mike tries to comfort him. Denny tells Mike to take care of Enzo and mentions to take my stuffed dog. Eve stayed in the hospital for a long time, and Denny took responsibility of the house. Denny let Zoe goes to Eve's parents' house for the weekend. Denny and I watched movies and visited the dog park. After visiting the hospital one day, Eve's parents, Max and Trish, and Denny talk. Max and Trish wanted Eve to stay at their house, and Denny agreed, much to my satisfaction. The day Eve was discharged from the hospital, a party was held at their parents' house. The hospital bed in the middle of the living room with a nurse. Eve feels self-conscious around the family. She doesn't like being seen sick. Eve's parents tell Denny that Zoe should spend more time with Eve, so she should stay with them. Denny wanted to talk to Zoe about this, and she agreed. That night, Denny wants to stay with Eve, but Eve doesn't want him to stay with her. Denny leaves me there. I sleep next to Eve until the nurse wakes me up. She said that she won't have me bother her, but I was sleeping. She shoves me into the garage, and later on, Eve finds me. We go back to her bed, and I stand guard for Eve so the zebra won't come back. Every visit, Eve looked better to Denny, but in reality, she wasn't. On Mondays or Thursdays, Zoe came home. It was February, and humans feel the need to celebrate their leaders' birthdays. All the schools were closed for a week, and Zoe, Denny, and I went to Methan Valley, to a cabin that one of Eve's relatives owned. I ran in the snow on the warm afternoons, but I preferred to lie by the baseboard heater. Eve didn't come, and her parents weren't there. I didn't like the idea at first. Eve would be dying soon. And second, that Zoe needed to spend time with people she had never met because Eve would soon die. But I wondered why they had waited for Eve's illness to make themselves available for companionship. Zoe and Denny mostly kept to themselves, and during dinner, one of the cousins were always willing to slip me some food under the table. This defies my usual rules, but there seemed to be a sense of relaxation in the cabin, so it seemed alright. Annika was young. Denny met her at a previous holidays years ago at a Thanksgiving or Christmas. She was an adult that still acted like a child. Annika dotted on Zoe and was emotional at the mention of Eve. Denny was ignorant of the advances she made. She would always position herself to be in contact with Denny or get up the same time he gets up so they would bump into each other. Denny wanted to leave the cabin, but the weather was getting progressively worse. There were supposed to be 6 feet of snow and sub-freezing temperatures, but Denny needed to work, and Zoe needed to adjust the school schedule. Annika talked urgently to Denny about the project that she was doing with her friends, but only after she knew that Denny was leaving earlier than her other cousins. Denny offered to take her home because of this. She happily agreed. The streets were covered in snow and ice, making the back end of the car slip and slide whenever Denny made a turn. Zoe and I were scared, and Zoe grabbed onto me in the midst of the sliding. While the traffic, Annika lied to her father, telling him that she would stay over Denny's house and that he will drive her home in the morning. Denny never agreed to this, but allowed her to stay over anyways. Annika put Zoe into bed, and she took a shower. Denny was tired after all of the driving, and he fell asleep on the bed. I was also tired, so I took a nap on the floor near Denny. When I woke up, I saw Annika standing over Denny in his bathrobe, and she stood there, watching him sleep. She then took off her robe and stood there naked and pulled away Denny's pants. Denny was exhausted and was still mostly asleep, and I didn't know what was going on. Annika tried to shoo me away, but I would never let the girl take advantage of Denny like this. The zebra's still here. I bark sharply at her, and Denny wakes me up. Denny and Annika argue about what had occurred and what hadn't occurred. Annika started saying "I love you" over and over to Denny. Denny tells Annika to get dressed and leaves the bedroom. When Annika comes out of the bedroom, she tells Denny that she called her father. I could tell that Denny was surprised by this, and that he hoped that she didn't tell him what had happened. She told her father that she wanted to go home because the bed was too uncomfortable. Her father came and picked her up, and she left. As time went on, Eve got worse. Zoe spent too much time with her grandparents, and Denny and I were trying to cope with the situation. It was around this time that Denny got another job offer, and this time he took me along. Denny allowed me to ride with him in a race car whenever he went around the track. It was exhilarating. Denny called it a hot lap. The wind in my fur and the sound of the car groaning as it sped around the track was fantastic. After we finished the track, there was a man there. His name was Luca. This was the first time I met Luca. He was also a race car driver. There was a party at Eve's parents' house. There, Eve confided in me that she knew she was going to die, and that she has accepted this fact. She died that night. Her last breath took her soul. I saw it in my dream. The next day, Denny and I went to the park. This is where Denny gets the call about Eve's death. I ran so quick and into the landscape of the park. I killed a squirrel and ate it. I ate it for Eve. I slept in the bushes for a little while, and Denny finds me. For Eve, her death was the end of a painful battle. For Denny, it was just a beginning. At Eve's parents' house, Eve's parents told Denny that they want custody of Zoe. They wanted to take Zoe away from us. Denny says no. Eve's parents, the evil twins, give Denny an envelope with suing papers. They were going to fight for Zoe. Racing is about discipline and intelligence, not about who has the heavier foot. The one who drives smart will always win in the end. Denny and I met a man at the cafe. His name is Mark Feen. He is Denny's lawyer. He gives advice to Denny about how to go about the situation. Mark tells Denny that he will probably give custody to him because unless Denny was convicted of a crime or spent time in jail, they always give custody to the biological parent. I could tell that Denny had to do something to get his mind away from the problem. We spent most of the day at Denny's workplace. It was peaceful there until the police came. They came with a warrant for arrest of Denny. When Denny came out, they accused him of felony of rape. I was denied most of the information, but I found out bits and pieces through Denny's meeting with Mark. When they let Denny out, Mark said that the court will reconsider giving him Zoe because of this. This is when I started to notice small changes in Denny. One of these changes is that Denny's hand started to shake. Mike and Tony tried to comfort Denny, but Denny doesn't want to be comforted. Mike and Tony gave genuine concern and worry for Denny's problems. I wish Denny could see it. I stare at Denny to judge him and bark at him when he takes a drink. I leave because I am disappointed that Denny would do that. I go to Zoe's room and sleep there. She is the only one I have left. I later see Denny in the doorway of Zoe's room, looking at me. He thanks me and says that he put away the drink. One day, Denny dressed up in black and we went to the park. I ran around in the morning dew. I love the smell of the rain. Denny and I walked for a long time. Eventually, we reached the Lakeview Cemetery. There were a lot of people there for Eve's funeral. There were people that had umbrellas, and Zoe was there. Eve's father and Eve's brothers try to get Denny to leave. Then Zoe comes over and hugs me and Denny. Denny tells Zoe that she will be staying with the twins for a little while. Denny and I then go and watch the ceremony from a hill that overlooked the cemetery. My health was getting progressively worse. The day after Eve's funeral, I couldn't stand in the morning because of my hip condition. Denny didn't get to see Zoe for a long time. Denny tells Mark to tell Zoe that he is in Europe and that's why he can't see her. He tells Mark to tell Zoe that I am staying with Mike and Tony. When she hears this, she says she wants to see me. So Mike brings me to Zoe at the twins' house. I play dress up with Zoe. I really took one for the team with the ridiculous outfit she made me wear, and I slept with her. She made a wall of stuffed animals around me before we went to sleep. The zebra was there, watching. I tried to ignore it as best as I could. As the twins and Zoe were eating dinner, I saw that they prepared everything nicely, but they didn't know what Zoe liked at all. When Eve's father took me outside to do my business, I put a stool on the precious rug. In September, Zoe was able to visit Denny. Zoe was home. I was so happy. Denny tried to explain the problem to Zoe, who assumes all of this is because of the twins. Denny won visitation rights to Zoe. We got to see Zoe every other weekend. Denny would bring Zoe to museums and at one time go-karts. Mark tells Denny that he is behind one on payment. Mark is appointed as judge. Denny found a new lawyer, Mr. Lawrence. He didn't seem as determined to help as Mark did, but I hoped that he would do it for the time being. One day, Denny was walking me without my leash, and he crossed the street without my knowing. When I tried to cross the street, there was suddenly a car there, and I was hit. Denny took me to the vet. I believe that I didn't die because my role in life was not finished yet. Denny struggled to pay the vet, and he was very discouraged. Denny was about to sign the papers allowing for Zoe to live with the twins, but I wasn't going to let him do that. I grabbed the papers in my mouth, jumped out the window, yes, the window, and urinated on them in the backyard. Denny sold our house and got an apartment. One day Luca called Denny for a job offer in Italy, testing Ferraris. Denny declined, saying that the trail is preventing him from leaving the country or state. Lucas says that he will save the job for him until the trial is over. One day when Denny took me out for a walk, we saw Annika and her friend at a cafe. Denny tells Annika all about his situation and his problems. I could tell that Annika was starting to see what her accusations did to Denny's life. Denny's parents come to the apartment. His mother is blind, but when she felt Zoe's face, she started crying. His father gave Denny an envelope with money inside. They did a reverse mortgage on their home and gave Denny the money to help make ends meet. It was Wednesday, the day of the trial. I was with Tony because dogs aren't allowed in the courthouses. When Denny comes out of the courthouse, he says that he won and that the accusations of rape were dismissed. Annika had admitted that her accusation was a lie. The twins stopped fighting for Zoe and Denny got custody of Zoe. We would all be together again. Luca calls again that night. He tells Denny that when his wife died, he almost died of grief. Since he knows what losing a wife feels like, he wanted to lend a hand in tough times. After Luca's call, I knew that everything was going to be alright. I knew my time was up. I pushed my muzzle into Denny's thigh and collapsed on the floor. Denny cradled my head in his lap and whispered to me that I could go. I saw a film once, a documentary. It said that after dogs die, they return as men. But there was something else. After a dog dies, his soul is released to run in the world, run through the fields, enjoy the earth, the wind, the rivers, the rain, and the sun. When I am reborn as a man, I will find Denny. I will find Zoe. I will walk up to them, shake their hands, and tell them that Enzo says hello. I don't know what that word says. Is that the rivers?